Hello everyone, it's Foo here, and today I want to talk about some completely useless abilities and how I really want them to be buffed in Scarlet and Violet. I want to talk about 4 abilities that have absolutely no effect in competitive battles. And I'm not talking about detrimental abilities like Slow Start, Defeatist, and Truant, as these have a purpose to bring down some very strong Pokemon and can actually be used in some really interesting strategies like Entrainment, Truant, Durant, making the opponent loaf around. Detrimental abilities can actually be weaponized against the opponent. No, I'm talking about abilities that have no effect and really need to be buffed. So let's get into it. The first one I want to talk about today is Run Away. This ability allows you to escape from wild battles regardless of your speed stat. Usually if you're slower than the opponent, there's a chance that you won't escape. But with Run Away, that's never going to happen. You will always escape. However, in trainer battles, obviously you can't run away anyway, regardless of if you've got the Run Away ability. And in competitive battles, if you want to forfeit, Run Away isn't going to help you do that any quicker. So this ability has no effect in trainer or competitive battles. There's actually a really obvious way to implement a useful mechanic for this move, and that's by avoiding trapping moves. So there are a number of moves and abilities in the game that can trap your Pokemon in and prevent you from switching them out. These include things like binding moves like Wrap, Fire Spin, Bind, and actually some of the G-Max moves like Sandaconda's G-Max Sandblast and Center Scorch's G-Max Centinferno, as well as blocking moves like Block and Mean Look, and also some abilities like Shadow Tag and Arena Trap. All of these things prevent you from switching, but it would make sense for a runaway Pokemon to be able to escape from these things. That's kind of what they're good at. They're good at escaping. And I think that this would actually be really easy to implement too, because we already see a similar mechanic for ghost types. All ghost types can't be trapped already, they can escape. So I think that we could just implement this for runaway Pokemon. I think that that would be just a nice practical in-battle application for this ability. What's really interesting is that we can already see that this kind of is the idea for runaway in wild battles. So against a Diglett that has the Arena Trap ability, I can't switch out. However, I can run away from an Arena Trap Pokemon that would usually trap my Pokemon into a wild battle. So Runaway does work against these trapping moves, but only to run away rather than to switch out. I think that this should be implemented for switching out too. Now, what effect would this have in competitive? Runaway has generally distribution in unevolved Pokemon, so probably not so competitively viable, but there are some fully evolved Pokemon that do have this ability. Some examples are Rapidash, Dodrio, and Thievul. Kanto Rapidash has the Flash Fire ability, which will probably always be more useful than Runaway, since Runaway is very situational only if your opponent has any of these trapping moves or abilities. But the Galarian Form's abilities are much more situational too, so the Galarian Form could actually benefit from this Runaway ability if you think you're going up against some trapping moves. And similarly for Dodrio, its other abilities are also situational. Early Bird is really only if you think you'll get put to sleep. Tangled Feet is only if you think you'll get confused. So if you think you're going up against trapping moves, then Runaway might be the selection for Dodrio too. All in all, these Pokemon aren't the most viable anyway, so I doubt that it will have a big metagame shift if Runaway had this boost, but I just would like to see it have some practical ability. Anyway, let's move on to the second ability. I want to talk about Ball Fetch, Yampa's signature ability. This one is pretty pants. So if you fail to catch a wild Pokemon, Yampa can pick up the ball that it broke free from. Now, I don't know about you, but in Pokemon games, I rarely find myself out of Pokeballs or out of money and I just need to scrounge that extra one. I don't think that that's a very useful ability, especially compared with Pickup when you can get loads of different items, and actually Pickup has an in-battle effect too. So, thinking about that, maybe Ball Fetch could mirror Pickup's in-battle effect, and that's really looking at the fetch part of Ball Fetch. If a Pokemon uses an item in a battle, the Pickup Pokemon can actually pick up that Pokemon and try to use that item itself. So Ball Fetch could have a similar effect. Maybe you could limit which items it picks up to more spherical objects. Maybe berries could be considered ball-like. I'm not sure, but some kind of application of this would be quite nice. Alternatively, instead of leaning on the fetch part of Ball Fetch, we could lean on the ball part of Ball Fetch And if Yamper is hit by any ball-shaped moves like Shadow Ball, Energy Ball, Gyro Ball, things like that, maybe it could get a speed boost or maybe take reduced damage as it's chasing after the ball and it doesn't get hit as hard. We already have an ability that looks at these ballistic kind of moves in Bulletproof. So Pokemon with Bulletproof can be immune to Shadow Ball and Gyro Ball. All the moves that I just mentioned, there's a whole list of them. And so Ball Fetch could actually work a little bit like that, but I do like the idea of getting a speed boost too to show that Yamper is chasing after the ball. I think that would be really cool. Obviously, if there were any buffs to this ability, it would have very limited competitive effect because Yamper does not have the stats for competitive play, and its evolution Bolton does not keep Ball Fetch. But I would kind of like to see Ball Fetch get a buff and maybe Bolton keep this ability, and then we might see this ability have more competitive play. I could see some like self-target Shadow Ball plays to give your Bolton a speed boost, and that would be kind of cool to see. So I'm hopeful that Ball Fetch will get a buff, but I do think it's much more limited than the other abilities that I'll talk about today. Let's move on to number 3, which is Honey Gather. This ability is also very useless, especially in Sword and Shield. So after a battle, a Honey Gather Pokemon may pick up some honey. Honey has pretty much no use in Sword and Shield, so not only does it have no in-battle effect, but its out-of-battle effect is pretty useless too. So in terms of a buff, I considered how honey was used in previous games. It kind of worked like Sweet Scent, in that it drew Pokemon towards you. So looking at Sweet Scent lowers the opponent's evasion by 2 stages. I think that Honey Gather could kind of work like Intimidate, but for evasion, dropping the opponent's evasion when you switch in to emulate that Sweet Scent effect. I think that would be so cool. And it would give Honey Gather Pokemon a real competitive niche because it would allow you to then use much more inaccurate moves. And again, I love things that do that because inaccurate moves generally don't get used so much because they're very risky. But if you have this evasion strategy with Honey Gather, then you're going to see loads of really interesting moves and interesting strategies. So this would be such a cool ability to see buff. The only fully evolved Pokemon that gets access to this ability is Ribombee. And actually, Ribombee could be a super cool support Pokemon. It already is very fast and gets speed swaps, so that's kind of nice to support Pokemon with speed. It does get access to Pollen Puff, which is a nice way to heal your ally while also having an offensive move, and it can't get taunted because Pollen Puff counts as an attack, but you can still heal your ally. And it gets access to Stun Spore, which would be very accurate if Honey Gather dropped your opponent's accuracy, so that you could then spam these paralysis moves. So Ribombee could automatically be a really cool support Pokemon, and I would really love to see this. I think it's actually got some very interesting competitive play. So this is probably the one that I would most like to see buffed. The last one I want to talk about is Illuminate, and this one is pretty interesting. So I've seen a number of suggestions about how Illuminate could be buffed, and a lot of people generally talk about accuracy and dropping the opponent's accuracy. And I guess that they are getting inspiration from the move Flash. So Illuminate is kind of a light-based thing where you're drawing Pokemon towards you with this intriguing light, and Flash is a light-based move that reduces the opponent's accuracy. Now, I don't actually think that this is such a fitting effect for Illuminate because, as I said, it's an attractive light that draws Pokemon towards you rather than this blinding light that's really harsh and drops Pokemon's accuracy. I think that the light of Illuminate is much more like the light of Spotlight, which was a move that we've only seen in Generation 7. Spotlight shone a light on a Pokemon in a Pokemon battle, and that Pokemon would become the center of attention, meaning that all attacks would be directed towards them. I'll show you some footage of an Oricorio using a flying move against my Shiinotic, but it gets redirected by Spotlight into my Lantern, which is bulky and can resist it. This shows that light-based moves can be used for redirection, which is a very powerful effect in Pokemon. Now, my proposal for Illuminate is to try to emulate this, but we have to be really careful because redirection is so strong in Pokemon that this could be very broken. So my proposal for this is if you switch your Illuminate Pokemon in, For that turn only, they become the center of attention. And this only works on a switch in. It doesn't work if your Pokemon faints and you bring in the Illuminate Pokemon fresh. Illuminate wouldn't activate. It only works if you've got a Pokemon in and you switch into the Illuminate Pokemon. They become the center of attention for that turn, and they have to take all incoming attacks, protecting your other Pokemon on the field in a doubles battle. I think that this can't work on the first turn of a Pokemon battle, or if you bring in an Illuminate Pokemon after one of your Pokemon has fainted, because that would allow the Illuminate Pokemon to attack on that first turn while they're center of attention. So you could like go for a protect while you're center of attention, which I think is way too strong. That can't happen. So it has to be on a switch in when your Illuminate Pokemon isn't going to be attacking that they become the center of attention. I think this would be so cool. It would be such a strong ability, and some really interesting Pokemon get this ability. So Pokemon like Shiinotic, Lantern, and Starmie all get this ability. Generally in doubles battles, they don't see too much usage, but I think that this would rocket them up that usage. They have some really good support moves, and they could become really great redirection support Pokemon. I would love to see this, but I do acknowledge that this might be a very strong and broken ability. So those are all of the completely useless competitive abilities and the buffs that I think that they should have. Please let me know your thoughts on my suggestions in the comment section below, and also let me know if you think of any other abilities deserve buffs. There are plenty of abilities that do have effects that are just pretty rubbish, and they should have buffs too. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing for more content. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.